this church and for giving us a place where we can come to discuss and to think and to hear about you, which many people in many other countries and many other places cannot say that they have. Please, God, be among us and guide us and give us your grace and your wisdom. And be with the words that are said and the words that are heard. And open our hearts to your work. The intercessions of St. Mary, the prayers of St. Andrew, the blessings of the holy 50 days. Hear us as we pray together, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Christ Jesus, our Lord, for us. Okay. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Christus anesti. Christ is risen. All right, great. So, today I would like to share. Today I'd like to share about an important topic, and it's really important because I think sometimes, guys, like we are all very gifted. We are all. Honestly, I'm not saying this to make you guys like me or anything, because actually one of the things I'm going to talk about is that the people don't like me is one of the excuses that we have. But what I am saying is that we're all great, you know? We're all like really, really great people. We're all very gifted. We're all very blessed by God. You know, we're all smart. We're all, people love us, right? Like, we are loved by people, right? There are people who ask about us. There are people who say, hey, how are you doing? Hey, where have you been? Hey, what's going on now, right? Somebody asks you about how you're doing in school. Somebody asks you how you're doing at work. Somebody asks you how your health is. If you get sick, someone's going to ask about you, right? Like, we have so many things and we're loved so much, right? But honestly, I think we take all of these things from God and we take them and we just say, let me just throw them in the garbage. Like, these things don't, what are these things? I don't really care what these things are. So what we want to talk about today is, after last week's talk, where we spoke about gifts and talents, we spoke about discovering what your talents are. Does anybody remember, by the way, any of the ways that we said you can find your talents or your gifts? Does anybody remember? There were a few that were said. Can somebody give me at least one? And I'm looking for two in total. Ali, excellent, thank you. So did everybody hear what she said?
No.
So Ali said one of the ways you can find out what your gifts and talents are is through introspection, right? Okay, what's another way? What's another way? Sure, the question is, what was one of the ways we discussed last week that you can find your gifts or talents?
Someone said like trying new things.
Trying new things, yeah. Okay, so we have introspection is one of the ways I can find my gifts and talents, right? So I can look in myself and say, hey, how do I feel when I'm doing this? Like, maybe I can go do something and just say, oh, how did I feel when I was doing that, right? Or, hey, what do I like to do, right? So I can look at myself. The other thing is I can just try new things, right? Many times, sometimes guys, you go to a restaurant and you order the same food because you go the first time you order something, you like this, so you keep ordering the same thing, right? Some people's personalities are like that, some people's personalities aren't, right? Some people like to try new things all the time. So, that's, last week we talked about how do you find your talents, how do you find your gifts, right? And of course you didn't find them all this week, right? But I hope that you got the tools or the ideas of how I'm gonna find them, right? Because I said, everybody has gifts, everybody has talents. All of you guys are great. If any of you think that you cannot make any contribution to the community, you are sorely mistaken, right? If you think, oh, I can't do this, and we're going to talk about some excuses today, right? If you think, oh, I'm too busy, oh, I can't do this, I can't make any contributions, you're sorely mistaken, right? So, last week we spoke about what my gifts are, but today what I want to speak about is what keeps me from doing those things? What keeps me from actually, you guys know what the word realize means? When we say realize, like, oh, I never realized something happened, right? But I'll tell you from a business point of view what the word realize means, right? Realize means, like sometimes you can buy a stock, right? So you buy a stock, and then let's say the stock was $10, right? Tomorrow, the stock goes up 50%, so it's worth how much? $15, please, sorry. So, that was worth $15, right? So now I own a stock that's worth $15. My gains are how many percent? 5,000 million? No, 50%, right? Well, my gains are 50%, right? So, did I realize those gains? Did I realize them? Or are they unrealized gains? I'll tell you what happened, what the right answer is. The answer is it's unrealized, right? When do I realize those gains? Now tell me the answer. When I sell the stock, right? When I sell the stock and I actually make the $5, I realize the gains. I have the gains in my hand, right? Because if I make 50% today and tomorrow it goes down by 33.333%, right? I'm back at $10, right? You guys with me? That's a lot of numbers, right? But you guys with me? Right? So me making 50% today doesn't mean anything if I lose that same $5 tomorrow, right? Because I never realized it. But if I sell the stock, I realize it. I have it, right? And the problem is we never realize the benefits of the gifts that God has given us. We don't realize them because we don't do anything with them, right? We just say, oh, I have them. And then you go to school and you learn something, and then you do some introspection, you learn something else, you try something new, you learn something else about yourself. And okay, but it's all unrealized, right? Because you didn't do anything with it. You never sold on it. You never used it, right? You just have it. What good is it, right? And that's exactly what happened to the servants, the stewards, right? God, the master gave them talents, right? He gave them money, right? He gave them money. Somebody tell them to come in, this is right. Yeah. So the master gave them money and they didn't do anything with it, right? The master said to the servant, the one who had one talent, right? What did he say to the guy who had one talent? Does anybody know what he said to the guy who had one talent? You didn't do anything with it? You didn't do anything with it? And then he told him, he said something about a bank, right? What did he say? Sorry, I keep thinking about banks and money.
Interest.
Yeah. Huh?
Interest.
Yeah. What can you say it, Mina?
I don't know. He said that it would have been better for me to put it in the bank and catch interest.
Yeah. He said, at the very least thing you could have done with the one talent, you fool, instead of hiding it in the ground, is you could have just given it to the bank and made interest on it, right? That's the least thing you could have done with it, right? By the way, anybody could do that, right? Anybody can go and just put it in the bank, right? And just make 1%, as it is now. Rates are pretty bad right now, but that's not the topic. So, you can make 1% now, right? So, actually, by giving the master the exact one talent that he gave him, he actually gave him less than what he should have given him. He actually he lost money for the master, right? Are you guys with me or no? You guys with me? Please tell me if you're not with me. It's an okay, kind of important concept, right? So, but the fact that he just gave his master back the one talent, he lost money for the master. He gave his master less than what he gave him originally, right? Because everybody could have earned that 1% by putting it in the bank, right? The master could have earned that 1%. But he took the talent away from the master and he said, no, you're not going to earn that 1%, master, right? And that's what we do sometimes when we come up with these silly, sorry, they're not silly, I have to be sensitive to people, right? But we come up with these excuses for not doing anything with our talents, right? God, that talent, that position that you give me when I'm in a group of reconciling people and making sure people talk well together, that position, God, I have that position, I'm not going to do anything with it, right? God, that skill that you gave me or that talent that you allowed me to acquire of being really good with technology, you know what, God? I'm going to sit among a group of people, they're going to ask for technology solutions, I'm not going to say anything. The Sunday school servant I serve with who asks me to help them with something, I'm not going to tell them anything. I'm just going to say, I don't have time. All right? So, any questions so far? Because I have some specific structured things to talk about. Anything? Great answer. So, 5 things. So I want to go through 5, like the title of today is Saying Yes to God Without Excuses. And the way I looked at this was to say what are 5 common excuses / obstacles that we have for actually realizing our gifts, right? Cool? All right, number one. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 20. The first excuse that, a common one that we have, is we say, God, the people, thank you. I think CNN is attending already. The first excuse is the people won't listen to me. The people won't listen to me, right? So somebody tells you, you know, uncle so-and-so, abuna so-and-so, I can't serve. No one's going to listen to me. Who am I, you know? Like, I'm a loser, you know? I'm nothing. Who am I? I don't have any position in the church, or my experiences aren't all that. You know, I didn't really do that much. Or I'm not really into that realizing my gifts kind of stuff. That's for you, the ones who are so gifted, right? So, let's go to Jeremiah chapter 20. And Jeremiah, by the way, does anybody know anything about Jeremiah? Anything about Jeremiah?
Is the lamenting prophet?
He's the what prophet?
Lamenting?
He's the lamenting prophet, right? Because there's a book called, in the Old Testament, Lamentations, right? By the way, that book was one with the book of Jeremiah, and then they split it up. So Jeremiah wrote the book of Lamentations, right? It was one book with Jeremiah. What else? Tell me another thing. Do you know that Jeremiah was killed? He was murdered? He was martyred?
Yeah.
Do you know where? Don't say it, you probably know. Does anybody know where he was martyred?
Egypt.
In Egypt. Yes, he was martyred in Egypt, right? Does anybody know Does anybody know how many people actually listened to Jeremiah's message and actually changed their lives?
No. Two.
2 people. Jeremiah is a major prophet, by the way. We have 5 books that are called the books of the major prophets. It's written by 4 prophets, because I said Jeremiah and Lamentations is by the same author, right? But there's actually 4 prophets who call the major prophets, not major because they're better than the minor, but just because the books are big, right? But Jeremiah is a prophet, right? He's a prophet. And actually maybe before we talk about what happened with Jeremiah in terms of him being sad that people don't listen to him, actually we'll go to Jeremiah chapter 1. He said God told him something so beautiful that actually I want you guys to take this for yourselves. Are you ready? Is everybody with me? Because this message is for each one of us individually. Okay? I'm reading Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 4. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, listen to how beautiful God's calling is. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you a prophet to the nations. Right? Before you were formed in the womb, I knew you. Can you imagine God was thinking about you before you were even born? Can you imagine that? And he said to Jeremiah, I ordained you a prophet to the nations. Jeremiah's calling, God called Jeremiah to be a prophet before Jeremiah was even born. God called Jeremiah to be a prophet before Jeremiah was even born. Do you believe that God has a calling for you, and your calling was set before you were even born? I'm not saying that you were definitely gonna respond to that call, right? That's a whole other question, right? We're gonna try to get through some common excuses for why I don't respond to my call, right? But do you believe that God had a calling for you specifically, not you generally, before you were even born? Before you were formed in your mother's womb? That's a big deal. That's a big deal. God had something in mind for me before I was born. God, the perfect God, the creator of the stars, the person who has all these things running, the one who says, he goes to a cell and he says cell, he gives it life, right? A cell has life, right? You look at a cell, you don't know where, like you say, oh, there's calories and there's all this energy and things moving around. This system feeds this system inside of the cell, right? But the actual life, right? Like God, he is life, right? This God our God, right? He has a calling for you. Clear? That's what he said to Jeremiah. So, now, Jeremiah, the one who God told him directly, he said, before you were formed in your mother's womb, I knew you, right? I ordained you a prophet to the nations, right? Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 20 and see what happens. Let's see what's going on with Jeremiah. Okay? So, Jeremiah now is saying, and we called him the what prophet? Say it louder.
Lamenting.
The lamenting prophet, right? So we call him the lamenting prophet. Let's hear one of Jeremiah's many lamentations, right? Because he's not just called lamenting prophet because of the book of Lamentations. He's called lamenting prophet because his whole service, only 2 people are converting in the end, and he gets martyred in Egypt, right? That's why he's lamenting, right? Because honestly, his life was pretty tough, all right? So, this is one of his many, many lamentations. He says, O Lord, you induced me, and I was persuaded. You are stronger than I, and have prevailed. And listen to this, I am in derision daily. Like, everyone mocks me. That's what he says. Everyone mocks me, right? He says, for when I spoke, I cried out, I shouted, violence and plunder. Like, he's trying to tell people, wake up, something bad is coming if you don't follow the Lord, right? Because the word of the Lord was made to me a reproach and a derision daily, right? So he said, my calling made me a reproach and a derision daily, right? God, you told me that before I was born, you ordained me a prophet to the nations. You knew me before I was born, before I was formed in my mother's womb. And the calling that you gave me, he said, because the word of the Lord was made to me a reproach and a derision daily. His calling was to be a reproach and a derision for him. Okay? Then what did he do? Then I said, this is Jeremiah speaking, verse 9. Then I said, I will not make mention of him, nor speak any more of his name. You see, this is a prophet. A prophet. He says, I will not make mention of him. He's talking about God, right? I nor speak in his name anymore. Right? What happened? Does anybody know what happened? All right. But his word was in my heart like a burning fire, shut up in my bones. I was weary of holding it back, and I could not. What did he do? So what did he say? He just said, what did he do? What happened? Should I read it again? But his word was in my heart like a burning fire, shut up in my bones, like it's held up in his bones. I was weary of holding it back, and I could not. I could not hold it back. So, what happened? Somebody reiterate, summarize, all that good stuff. Paraphrase. Somebody say something.
He still continued to preach. Even though he was sick of like being made fun of, he still continued it because it was just part of it.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely right. That he continued to preach. Right? Was the fact that people did not listen to him an excuse for him? Was it an excuse that made him stop responding to his calling? It's a non-rhetorical question. No.
No.
Geniuses. Geniuses. All right. So number one, the people won't listen to me is not an excuse. All right? We're good? Any questions? No? All right. We're going to go to number 2. John chapter 6. Does anybody know what John chapter 6 speaks about? It's a very famous chapter that, like, there's a very important topic that fell out of this Bible because the pages aren't there. Does anybody know what John chapter 6 is about? I think it's so important that people just kept taking the pages out of the Bibles. And Kamel, you're not allowed to say because you know. Well, you're going to say something. Wow. This is crazy. We don't have a Bible. All right, maybe it's in these papers. It is. That is such an important topic, people are stealing it out of the Bible. I'm going to read you a page that somebody failed to steal. Okay, so, what is John chapter 6 about?
Feeding manna.
It is about manna, yes.
Feeding 5,000.
All right, feeding 5,000. Good, great. Come on, guys, it's super, super duper important. It's if somebody asks you about this, if somebody tells you what John 6 is about, you have to know. It's not about baptism, that's John 3 and many others. John 6 is about communion. John 6 is about communion. Okay? If somebody asks you, hey, where does it talk about communion? One of the first places you say is John chapter 6. Okay? See, Abuna knows about it. See? Want to be like Abuna? Remember John chapter 6. Alright. So, what happened in John chapter 6, right? This is when Jesus Christ, our Lord, is saying... So, I never told you what the second one is. So the first one was, what was the first one? The first excuse, the people won't what? Won't listen. The second one is that the people won't like me. The people won't like me, right? So we said the first one, the people won't listen. We had Jeremiah. The people weren't listening to him. Doesn't matter. He's still answering his call. Now, the people won't like me. Let's see what Jesus did. And by the way, it's kind of easy. Jesus is perfect. You know what he's going to do, right? So, Jesus now is introducing a very important topic, and the topic is communion. All right, great. So he's introducing communion, right? So he starts saying, Jesus starts saying all this stuff, right? He starts saying, I am the bread which came down from heaven. And then people start saying, it's not this Jesus, the son, verse 42, chapter 6, verse 42. It's not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know. Like, didn't we see his parents, Saint Mary and Joseph, right? And he says, and how is it then that he says, I have come down from heaven? And then Jesus says lots of other things too, right? He says, no one can come to the Father, can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up at the last day. And then he says, I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I shall give is what? Is my flesh, right? This is what Jesus is saying. This is the first time they're hearing this, right? This is the first time they're hearing this, right? He's saying, the bread I shall give is my flesh. This is Jesus saying. And people look at him, your flesh, your bread from heaven is your flesh, right? And people know what the word flesh means. You guys know what it means, right? So they definitely know what it meant. So this is my flesh. So he's looking at him. He's saying, this is bread, right? That's what he's saying, right? Which I shall give for the life of the world, right? And then he says, most assuredly I say to you, not just I came from heaven, right? And not just that my bread, the bread that I shall give you is my flesh, right? Then he says, most assuredly I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. I mean, these people are gonna go crazy, right? They're like, he's off the wall, right? He's saying the craziest things. He's saying he came from heaven. We see his parents. And he's saying he came from heaven, right? And then he's saying that he's going to give us bread to eat, and that bread is his flesh. And then he's saying that unless you eat it, you have no life in you. That's what Jesus is saying. Does anybody know how the people respond? The people run? How did the people respond?
Did they leave and some of his disciples left too?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Do you think that what Jesus said, I mean, Jesus is coming up. Can you imagine somebody goes up to you and he says, you're dead unless you eat my flesh? He punched you in the face, right? But can you imagine somebody, Jesus goes up to somebody, he says, you have no life in you. You're dead, right? Unless you eat my flesh, right? Do you think that's going to offend some people? Or no? I'm just asking.
Hypothetical.
Yeah, just a hypothetical question, right? Actually, it's not so hypothetical, because Jesus said to the people, it says in 61, he said to them, does this offend you, right? He says, does this offend you, right? And then he says, what then, okay. So, then he says, it says in verse 66, like Nina said, from that time, many of his disciples went back and walked with him no more, right? Is that clear? So do you think people stopped liking him after he said that they were dead? Or that they had to eat his flesh? And that he came down from heaven even though his parents were right there? So, what did he say? Does anybody know what he said after that? Let's see if this became an excuse. Because Jesus Christ, right? He's starting his ministry. It's John chapter 6. It's not like John 21, where his ministry time is ended, right? Or not ended, but after he, So, this is in the beginning of his ministry. And already, he just called his disciples. He just called people, right? And now he's getting a whole group of people around him. And now it's saying, from that time, many of his disciples, not the 12, many of his disciples went back and walked with him no more. He just started his ministry, guys. Can you imagine somebody says, hey, Mina, can you please help me? We're going to help with the summer camp this summer, right? And Mina comes and helps, and the very first day, all the kids start throwing tomatoes at him. Or food. They start throwing food at him, right? And he's going to say, oh my gosh, I came and I wanted to use all my gifts, right? And I have all these talents and I have so many great ideas, right? And all these kids don't like me, right? What did Jesus say?
Didn't he say something like, if you want to leave, then go ahead and leave, or something like that?
Yes. So Jesus is like, all right, these guys left. Now let me go to my core disciples and let me ask them, do you also want to go away? Jesus is not backing down, right? He has a calling, right? He has a calling. He has a mission, right? He has a gift, right? He is a gift, right? And he has a gift, right? He has a talent. He has something to do, right? And he is not backing down. So what was the first excuse that the people don't what? Don't listen. And the second one, the people don't like it. Are these excuses? No. All right, great. Yes, go ahead, Nancy. You want to say something? All right. Now we're going to go to Joshua chapter 10. So, I hope it's in the Bible. Maybe it's not as popular. Last time we had a hard time finding John. All right. So, does anybody know what the third excuse is? Actually, some good friends gave me this one. Does anybody know what the third excuse is? It's I don't have time. I don't have time. Okay? So, what if I don't have time in the service? Is anybody here busy? Or George is really busy. He's texting people right now. He can't. The world's going to collapse if he doesn't respond. And so sometimes I say, God, I cannot realize anything in my gifts because I don't have time. I'm just busy, God. What do you want me to do? Right? So, let me just tell you really quickly so that we don't have to read the whole chapter. It's already 9 o'clock. What happened with Joshua, right? So Joshua was whose assistant? Moses' assistant, right? He was serving under Moses, right? And then Moses, he had that whole problem where he hit the rock with the rod, and the rock, and he went against God. He was really upset. So God told him he can't enter the promised land. So Moses now couldn't enter the promised land. Is that a really important conversation you're having? Probably not, because we're talking. Thanks. So Moses, he's now on a mountain, right? Moses dies on a mountain. He spent 40 years trying to go take the people through the wilderness, and he messes up in the end. And now God said, you can't go to the promised land. It's all right. Moses is going to be all right. Don't worry. He ends up appearing later in the New Testament, in the Transfiguration. So, but who is called to take over after Moses? Joshua, right? Joshua's called to take over, right? Now, Joshua starts winning all these wars, right? Joshua starts taking the Israelites, right? And he starts winning. He takes them into the promised land. They're like clearing it out for themselves, right? So they start saying, these people don't want to believe in God, whatever. That's just how things happen in the Old Testament. Don't ask me why. It's a complicated subject, or it's not that complicated. It's not time for it. So he goes out and he just starts killing all these people just to get them out of the way, right? It's the promised land. It belongs to the Israelites, right? The people don't want to follow God, and that's it, right? So there was one group of people called the Gibeonites, so people of Gibeon, right? They said, okay, this guy Joshua's winning all these wars. We're going to be his friend. We're going to be his ally. Let's not worry about it, right? So then this other king hears about Joshua, right? This king, his name is Adoni-Zedek. Adoni-Zedek. I don't know if that's pronounced right. He's the king of Jerusalem at the time. So what happens is that Adoni-Zedek says, my kingdom, my Jerusalem, is like awesome, right? If this guy Joshua comes and messes it up, I'm going to bust his face, right? That's what he says, right? No. So what he does is, he goes up to all these other kings, and he says, guys, he gets all these kings, and he says, guys, listen, let's go and get Joshua before Joshua gets us, all right? So Joshua goes, so Adoni-Zedek goes to all these kings, They all form like an alliance, and they're all gonna go and they want to get at Joshua. So who do they attack to get at Joshua? The Gibeonites. So they go to Gibeon and they attack them, right? So they're coming to attack them. Gibeon sends a message to Joshua. He says, Joshua, you gotta hook me up here, you gotta help me out. This is really messed up. I'm your ally and these people are trying to get at you and they're coming at me, right? So Joshua says, I got your back, let's pray and let's go, right? So Joshua goes and he starts seeing all these kings that are coming to attack. All these kings are coming to attack, right? So what does Joshua do?
Right.
He prays. Great answer, Abino. He prays, which is something we should all do. And what does he do? This is by the way, it's really famous. Like it's popular. It's known. What did Joshua end up doing? Joshua prayed for something very specific.
The sun.
Kamel, you can't give us all the answers right away. I gotta build suspense here. Yeah. So Joshua prayed for something very specific. What was it? Joshua prayed that the sun would stop. Is it? That's normal or no? That's normal? You pray the sun would stop? Has anybody ever here said, God, I don't have any time to get to church. Can you please stop the sun? Can you say that? Has anybody ever done that? Because you don't have enough faith. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Right? No, but so that's what Joshua did, right? Joshua's going to attack the people, and actually what he did, he won the war. And now what he's doing, now what Joshua's trying to do, is to like chase them out, right? But he's succeeding so much that he doesn't have enough time to keep succeeding, right? So he says, God, stop the sun. And God stops the sun for a whole day. So God created time for Joshua to respond to his call, right? Is that clear? Do you guys agree with me? Or disagree? Yeah? Yeah? All right. So God created time for Joshua, right? The point is that I can tell God I have no time. I can tell God I have no time. Or I can say, God, I'm going to respond to my calling. You make the time, right? If you gave me this calling, you will give me the time. Is that clear? This is because guys, I'll tell you something. Life, I'm telling you now, we're all graduates here, we're all adults. There will never come a time in your life where you're gonna be less busy. Right? May God be with everyone, you all just keep your jobs and everything you do. So, and all that good stuff and your families and all that, right? But there's never gonna come a time when you're gonna all of a sudden have time. Right? Especially in this life we live. Maybe if you live in like outside of New York City, it's gonna be different, right? But there's never gonna come a time when you're like, oh, well, I have nothing to do today, or tomorrow, or the day after, or the day after. Maybe you'll have a day to relax, right? But then you gotta get back to studies, you gotta go to service, you gotta take care of your own spiritual life, right? You gotta exercise, you got so many things you gotta do, right? So there's never gonna come a time when you're free and you have all this time to serve. But what you say is, God, make the time for me if this is your call. Otherwise, God, it's your call. What am I going to do? Right? Any questions on this point? Because we're going to go to number 4 because we're running out of time. But God will make the time. Just kidding. All right. So the next point. So the first excuse was the people won't listen. The second one is the people don't like me. And the third one is I don't have time. All right. The fourth one is I am not gifted or talented. I am not gifted or talented. Do you believe, do you guys, can anyone, not, you don't have to give an explanation, but can anyone relate to saying to God, I am not gifted, God. Like, I don't have a talent that I can do anything with. Like, I don't have anything, right? I can say that about some, no, I'm just kidding. But can anybody say that? Can anybody relate to saying that at any time in their lives? God, I don't have anything. What am I going to do, I'm just some guy. I'm a normal person. As if normal is not a great thing, right? So let's go to Exodus chapter 3, and we're going to hear about a very important character. The important character is Moses. In Exodus chapter 3 and 4, Moses was called in a very special way. One, he was called in a specific setting. What can you describe the setting to me where Moses was called?
What chapter?
The burning bush, right? Exodus chapter 3, right? So Moses is just walking around doing his thing, right? And then, all of a sudden, he sees a bush, and the bush is on fire, right? The bush is on fire, right? And then, he's looking at it, and he's like, oh, there's a bush on fire. That's interesting. And he's just hanging around, right? And then he's like, wait, hold on a second. This bush is not burning. It's not consuming the leaves. The leaves are not getting consumed. What's going on? So he starts walking closer to it, and then all of a sudden he hears God say to him, take off your sandals because you're in a holy ground. Take off your sandals because you're in a holy ground, right? And then just to keep moving, God starts telling him a whole story about the Israelites, right? And he says, like, I called them out of all these people, and I wanted them to come follow me, and now they're stuck in Egypt, and they don't want to turn to me, and all this stuff. And then God gives him a call. God gives him a call. So Exodus chapter 3, verse 10. What we're about to read is the calling of Moses. It's the call. So you want to know, what does a calling sound like? Well, it could sound like this, right? So he says to Moses in Exodus 3:10, he says, come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh. This is God talking out of a burning bush. The burning bush is not getting consumed, and God is talking to Moses, right? He says, come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Burning bush, on fire, not consumed, holy ground, God talking. Come now, I'll send you to Pharaoh. Okay? This is Moses' call. What does Moses say? Moses, honestly, like, I left him for the fourth one because the fifth one doesn't really relate to him. I couldn't find the relationship as easily, but that's just my own ignorance. But I left him as the fourth one because he kind of sums up all the excuses, right? Moses came up with, does anybody know how many excuses he came up with?
5, 7, 4, 5, 6.
All right, Kameli's usually right. I was going to say 4, he said 5. He's going to tell us about the fifth one later because I only know 4 of them. But tell us if I'm missing one. So I have 4 so far. We'll go through them, and if I'm missing one, Bruno will tell us too. Okay.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
we were just looking up the 5. Or 4, whatever.
So I found at least 4 excuses that Moses comes up with. Remember, I just said it, and I'm repeating again, because this is like unbelievable now. None of us get our calling out of a burning bush and where it's not getting consumed and God is talking to us, right? Our calling comes to us in a much more subtle way, right? First thing Moses says, verse 11, what Moses said to God, right? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? Like he's saying, God, I'm a loser, I'm not, who am I? I'm not gonna, you want me to go up to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, one of the most powerful countries at the time, and tell him, hey Pharaoh, what's up, dude? Can I have the Egyptians who pretty much built this country? The Israelites who are pretty much working for you, and we need to leave. And I'm not gonna give you anything back. You can go. That's it. Right? You think Moses is gonna do that? Moses is saying, God, I can't do that. I can't do it, right? Stop laughing. So, this is not answering his call. So Moses says that. So what does God say to him? Verse 12. God is the thing is, you won't believe that Moses keeps coming up with excuses after the things that God is telling him. Honestly, somebody comes up to you and he says, listen, please, come serve with us. Come help us with this. Please, go talk to this person, they're struggling with something. I'm nobody. I can't talk. I have no experiences. I'm busy. I'm this. They won't like me. He'll get offended. And we come up with the most excuses. And the things that God says to Moses, and Moses is so full of excuses, and ended up hurting him in the end. So, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? Verse 12. So God said, I will certainly be with you, and this shall be a sign to you that I have sent you. This is a sign. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Okay? First sign, God is telling Moses, when you bring them out of Egypt, I'm telling you from now, when you bring them out of Egypt, they're going to serve on this mountain. It's a prophecy. This will happen. That's your sign. Is that good enough for Moses? By the way, nothing was good enough for Moses, by the way, right? All right. So then Moses said to God, indeed, Moses, he's Moses. Say this. I mean, we can all say to God whatever we want, right? We all have free will. So, indeed, when I come to the children of Israel and say to them, so now watch this excuse, right? Indeed, when I come to the children of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? The second excuse Moses is saying is, God, I don't know enough. I don't even know who you are, right? So somebody says, hey, Mina, can you come and help us? Please, Mina, just sit in the Sunday school class and hug the kids when they leave, tell them you love them, right? You say, but I don't know enough. You know, I didn't go to seminary. But dude, we're just asking you to sit in the class, bro. I didn't go to seminary, I don't know enough, right? So this is what Moses is saying, right? So what did God say to him? So God says, you know what? I'm about to tell you who I am right now. He says, and God said to Moses, verse 14, I am who I am. And he said, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, I am, has sent me to you. And then he keeps going on and on. Then God said to Moses, you shall say to the children of Israel, the Lord God of your fathers out of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name. Go gather the children of Israel and all this stuff, right? And then he said to them, he said, then they will heed your voice. So you see, so God is, first of all, God is educating them. By the way, the Jews cannot say this, by the way, just so you know. There's a few things you should know about this, I am who I am, right? We're saying this because we have grace to call God our Father, right? We can know him, we're reconciled to him as Christians, right? But Jews, what they do, this I am who I am, by the way, when it was written in Jewish scrolls, it was written with a special golden pen, right? And there's a whole ceremony around just writing this thing, I am who I am, right? And they can't even say it. And even sometimes they take it into English, and you see, like right now, if you go on, like this happened to me on Facebook one time. I had a really good Jewish friend writing to me, and they said they didn't want to say the name of God. They didn't want to say God, so they said G-D, right? Because they're taking it from what was happening here, right? They can't say this name, but God is telling Moses, here, now I'm educating you. Here is who I am. Who I am is this experience. This experience you're having with me, this is your experience with me. Now go serve, right? And then he said to him, he said, then they will heed your voice. God is telling him, hey, I'm God. I'm telling you, they're going to heed your voice, right? All right. So, what do you think is next? I told you this before, so you know what's next, right? So, Moses says to God, then he says to God. Then Moses answered and said, but suppose they will not believe me or listen, right? Or listen to my voice. Suppose they say, the Lord has not appeared to you. Third excuse, right? So first he says, God, I'm nobody. Second, he says, I don't know who you are. Third one, he says, what if they're not going to listen to me, right? And God is like, all right, I got this one too. Don't worry about that, right? So God says to Moses, he says, what's in your hand, right? He says, verse 2, what is that in your hand? And Moses said, a rod, because Moses was a genius, right? So he said, a rod, right? And then he said, and then God said, he said, cast it on the ground, right? So Moses takes it, Moses takes it and he drops it on the ground, right? What happened to it? It becomes a what? It becomes a serpent. What does Moses do when it becomes a serpent? He gets scared, right? Sometimes we realize our own gifts and then we get scared that we actually accomplish something with our own gifts, right? Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I succeeded. I hate this. This feels so weird. I succeeded, right? Sometimes, hey, dude, can you please go talk to this guy? This guy is struggling, man. He really needs someone to be his friend. And you go talk to him, and things go really well, and he likes what you have to say, and you're like, man, this feels so weird. It's actually working on you, right? So that's what we do sometimes, right? Moses, God gave him the gift. He said, drop it, and it became a serpent. He's like, oh, I can't do this. It's scary, right? All right. So then the Lord said to Moses, reach out your hand and take it by the tail. And he reached out his hand and caught it and became a rod in his hand. Okay. Then God said to him, like, guys, and I told you, like, you won't believe the amount of things God told Moses, and Moses is still giving excuses, right? We don't want to be Moses in this. We want to be Moses in his righteousness and all these other great things. Very important. But not this. So, furthermore, the Lord said to him. So he's still just saying, like, they're not going to believe that you spoke to me, right? So he sticks with the rod, he drops it, it becomes a snake, he gets scared, he picks it up, it becomes a rod again, right? Then he says, now put your hand in your bosom. So he puts his hand like this, and he takes it out, and what is on it? It's leprous, right? He has a disease now, all of a sudden, right? Like, and then he puts it back in, and then now it's not a disease anymore. Now you see leprosy, now you don't, right? That's it. That's what happened, right? So that's what happened. That's what happened with Moses, right? It happened. It happened in front of his eyes, right? He says, rod, serpent, hand, leprosy. That's it, like that. And then God said, okay, watch this. Go and take water from the river or the body of water and put it on the ground. And watch what's gonna happen, Moses. Right? What happens? It becomes what? It becomes blood, right? So now it's like, I mean, what else does Moses want? What else does Moses want? Right? It becomes blood. God tells him that he gives him a prophecy where they're going to worship. Or where they're going to find themselves after they come out of Egypt. He tells him his name, which no one can say at that time. And then he gives him 3 slamming miracles, right? He gives him big time miracles, right? And not just he tells him you have them. Moses witnesses the miracles, right? It's not just saying somebody goes up, hey Kiro, you're really good at playing basketball and building brotherhood when you in exercise and at the gym. You're really good at that, and that's it. It's not like that. No, you actually witness it. He saw the miracles with his own eyes. What does Moses say? Then Moses said to the Lord, verse 10, "Oh my Lord, I am not eloquent. I am not eloquent. Neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." Wow, Moses, wow. So you start seeing all these miracles, and now you're telling God that you're slow of speech and slow of tongue. Bro, don't say anything. Just put your hand in your bosom and take it out. We're done, right? No? But that's what he said. So God says to him now, that was the 4th excuse. He says to him, so the Lord said to him, verse 11, "Who has made man's mouth?" So God is telling him, Moses, enough already. You're saying you're slow of speech. I made your mouth. You're speaking because I made you speak, right? He says, or who makes the mute, the deaf, the seeing, or the blind? Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth, and teach you what you shall say. Right? Moses, every excuse, God covered it. God covered every excuse, right? And then Moses said, now, but he said, "Oh my Lord, please send by the hand of whomever else you may send." Now what is the Lord feeling? Now the Lord is angry, right? Because now God is like, I just gave you, I called you, I gave you all these talents, and now I'm sending you out to do the work that you were called to do, and you're just giving me a ton of excuses. What ends up happening with Moses is that God gives him, God gives him Aaron, his brother, right, to go and speak on his behalf. So Moses is still going to be the one to communicate with God, and Aaron's going to be the one to communicate with the people, right? So, but what ended up happening was, do you guys know who built the golden calf that the Israelites ended up worshiping? Who built the golden calf? Right? When Moses was up on the mountain, Aaron built the golden calf. Aaron ended up being a weakness in Moses' service. Do you believe this? Or no? Aaron ended up being a weakness in Moses' service. A lot of ruckus going on here. I'm not really sure what's going on. So, any questions on that? Are we clear, guys? I got one more. We got one more excuse. We got a quick presentation and we're done.
Yeah, Mari.
Yes. No, that was 4. That was the 4th one. Yeah, people are auditing. So, okay. Are we good, guys? Any questions? Are we good? 5th and last one, because I said there were 5, and there's 5. That there is too much drama. God, there's too much drama for me to answer my calling. There's too much drama. Every time I try to do something, somebody starts giving me some drama. Somebody starts telling me I can't do this, I can't do that. All this stuff, right? So, I just want to tell you very quickly, because we're short on time, some examples of what was happening in the service. And to show you that this also is not an excuse to use your cell phone in the middle of the truth. All right. So So, the first example is, does anybody know who brought Paul into the service? Who brought Paul into the service? Who took Paul, after he became Paul, from being Saul of Tarsus to Paul? Who brought Paul in front of the apostles and said, hey, we need this guy to serve? And the apostles said, whoa, isn't this the guy who was persecuting Christians? And then this guy, the one I'm asking you about, he said, no, but he's not going to do that anymore. Now he's with us, right? Who is that person? Huh? Barnabas. Does anybody know how many times Barnabas' name is mentioned in the Bible?
5.
It's about 14 times. Does anybody know how many times St. Paul's name is mentioned in the Bible?
70.
It's a few hundred, right? So, Barnabas was the one who like Barnabas' talent, his gift, was to see gifts and talents in other people, right? Because this is not the only person he did it with. Who else did Barnabas do this with? Who else did Barnabas identify as a great servant? And by the way, I'll give you a hint. We are all beneficiaries of this identification. St. Mark, right? Right? He said it first. You said it second. All winners. Right? No excuse.
He was his uncle.
Huh?
Barnabas was his uncle.
Because he was his uncle. So, are you guys, please pay attention. I know everybody's getting crazy for no reason. But so Barnabas identified St. Paul, and then Barnabas identified St. Mark, right? After a while, Barnabas is like, hey, St. Paul, let's take Mark with us. Guys, pay attention. I can't do that. So he says, guys, please, let's take St. Mark with us, right? After a while, St. Mark was very young in his service. St. Mark, the one who brought Christianity to Egypt, right? At a time, he was so young and so he was just weak, he was new, right? He was new, like all of us are new, right? And he was scared. And he really made Paul really annoyed, right? Paul was like, we can't take this guy with us everywhere we go. He's really slowing us down. We gotta serve God, and this guy's slowing us down. Barnabas was like, no way, dude. We gotta take him with us. Don't forget, Barnabas was the one who brought St. Paul in the first place, right? So what ends up happening is that some drama happens, right? What was the drama? Now Barnabas and Paul, it says in the book of Acts, it says the contention was so great, right? They were arguing so much about this that all of a sudden they divided, right? Barnabas went one way with Mark, and Paul went another way, I think, with Silas, right? So there was drama. But did that stop the service or no? No, didn't stop, right? Just a few more examples real quick. Another one was with the circumcision. This is why they had the council in Jerusalem, right? They were arguing, should Christians should Christians become circumcised before they go to be baptized, right? Is that what should happen? So they had a council in Jerusalem about that. They were arguing, they disagreed, and then they resolved it. Did that stop the service? Was that an excuse that there was drama? Then there was drama between St. Paul and St. Peter about St. Peter not wanting to eat with Gentiles. He wanted to eat with the Jews. So they got into a fight about that. Did that stop the service? No. Then there was drama in 1 Corinthians 1. You see, people are saying, no, I belong to Apollos. No, I belong to St. Paul. No, I belong to Christ, right? Did that stop the service? No. And the last one, I already said it, so we're done. All right. Any questions, guys? Because we have to, after you ask your questions, then you have a lot of them, we just have to spend exactly 5 minutes. I'm sorry, I know you guys are going to kill me. I've been speaking so much. I just want to show you the structure that we saw last time, so we're all cool on with it. I want to tell you about some specific roles that you guys can join, and tell you what our plans are, and tell you some updates that we had based on your feedback last time. Does anybody have any questions about this stuff that we spoke about? I'm supposed to give you 7 seconds of silence. That's the rule. It'll make you awkward when you say something, but you guys are used to awkward. So. All right, glory be to God forever. Amen. So.